Welcome to this Killik Explains finance video. This week I want to take on something a little bit topical and a little bit of a strange name. It's the volfefe index. You may have come across it in the media. It is basically an index that follows the tweeting activity of Donald Trump. Now, why would you want to do that? What's it got to do with investing? Well, those are two questions I'll take a look at in this short video. So, what should investors make of the Trump volfefe index? Right, so the background is what? Well, like him or loathe him, and I think it's fair to say people will split on this. Basically, Donald Trump seems to have the power to move markets. And some brain boxes at JP Morgan have been trying to work out how far and whether that matters for investors. So, JP Morgan have built a new index which claims to capture the extent to which Donald Trump does move markets. But for long-term investors, the question remains, is this just a sideshow, or is there anything in it that's useful or meaningful? So, volfefe, quite an odd name, I think you'd agree. So let's do a quick roundup for those people who missed it as to why it's called that. Trump is a Twitter addict. He's released around 10,000 tweets since taking office. Begs the question, how does he have time to run the country? But he seems to do it in part through Twitter. He seems to delight in avoiding mainstream media outlets and going through Twitter. So, the name comes from a tweet on the 31st of May 2017 for Twitter historians out there. Despite the constant negative press, volfefe, which was his bizarre tweet, and since then people have been trying to work out what he actually meant because he never actually clarified it himself, and speculation is he might have meant coverage. Either way, some people at JP Morgan who might need to get out more often thought it would be incredibly amusing to come up with a volatility-based tweet index, if you like, or a Twitter index based around the idea of volatility. Do his tweets move the market? If so, how much, how fast, and how far? And they called it volfefe. Volatility and that weird word sort of mashed together. So there you have it. Right, enough history. What do JP Morgan think they're achieving by putting this thing together? Well, in a nutshell, the question is, how far do Trump's tweets affect, in particular, bond markets? Now, other banks are focused on other parts of the market. We'll come to that in a moment, currency and equity markets, but they started out looking at the bond market in particular. And they said, no matter what the content of these tweets, whether it makes sense or not, they do seem to have the ability to move markets. And in particular, bond markets' view of what might happen to interest rates next. And you can see why. Because he is the president of the US. Now, there's controversy around the fact that he shouldn't have any direct or indirect influence over the interest rate decisions of the Fed, but he does seem to be politicizing, some would argue, what's going on at the Fed at the moment. So analysts, basically here's the technical stuff as far as I'm going to do it in this short video, analysts capture a rolling sample of recent tweets to judge their overall impact on volatility. That's the basic mechanism. And it seems his thoughts do impact changes in the bond market's interest rate forecasts. And if you were drilling down, you'd say in particular, there seems to be effect around what's called the 2 and 5, one of the more important forecasts. So within bond markets, it seems there may be, stress maybe, some short-term impact deriving from Trump's activity, the volume of tweets and what's in them, in terms of the way the market views interest rates. And it's not just about bonds. So, hot on the trail of JP Morgan, if you like, comes Citigroup, who've looked at currency markets. All right, and I've done other videos on currency markets, by the way, for novices. I'm going to keep it short here. They reckon a wide range of currency pairs. Currencies are always quoted in pairs. They don't float by themselves. It's always the pound versus the dollar, the euro versus the dollar, the yen versus the euro. So they're quoted in pairs, show higher than expected volatility 1 hour after a Trump tweet. And this stuff's quite significant. This is the president of the biggest economy in the world, by certain measures, affecting directly what's going on in the markets using Twitter. Specifically, his comments impact the US dollar, not surprisingly, versus the euro and the yen in the short term. And it doesn't just end there. So there's a bond market impact, potentially. There's a currency market impact of some sort. What about the equity market impact? Now, before we get there, what are the trigger words? So what are the things that he tweets which seem to move markets the most in the short term? And here they come. The top 5 are China, not surprisingly, given the ongoing trade war. Billion is a big one. Products is another one. Democrat, slightly political one. And finally, tariffs. Now, these could change, but those seem to be the trigger words that, when they're contained within a Donald Trump tweet, easy for me to say, do have some market moving impact in the short term. A broad swathe of assets, from single name stocks to macro products, have found their price dynamics increasingly beholden to a handful of tweets from the Commander-in-Chief, as JP Morgan put it. So the question then becomes, well, as an equity investor, what am I supposed to make of all this? So for equity investors, where does this leave us? Well, Bank of America, wading into the party if you like, have analysed the impact of Donald Trump's activity on stock prices. And since 2016, when they started their review, the stock market has fallen on days with more than 35 Trump tweets, and there are quite a few of those, by the way. Conversely, it's risen on days with fewer than 5 tweets. So it's like an inverse indicator of market direction, if you like, and it's linked to the number of tweets that he actually issues. So there seems to be an effect there, but what do long-term investors make of all this? Well, in a nutshell, social media is just ultimately another source of noise, even if, in the case of Donald Trump, that noise is more significant than it would be if, for example, Tim Bennett would have put out a tweet. Trump's tweets are actually suffering from the law of diminishing returns, insofar as people thought, crikey, first time President of the USA is engaged on social media, Twitter, better take notice of what he's saying. Is he politicising the Fed? Is the Fed truly independent? All that debate's gone on and so on. Is he treading on ground where he shouldn't? All that stuff. But it seems that over time, the market, as it tends to, is absorbing or getting used to Trump's pronouncements on social media. And as for long-term equity investors, let's be honest, what are we saying here? We're saying there is a short-term impact, or there may be a short-term impact if you're JP Morgan on short-term interest rate forecasts, if you like. There may be a short-term impact, so Citigroup, on currency markets, certain currency pairs, and there may even be an impact, according to Bank of America, on short-term stock prices. But as a long-term investor, I think you can probably safely say most of what Donald Trump puts out in Twitter can safely be ignored. Interesting from a certain point of view in the short term, but actually not terribly constructive to any long-term investors out there. To find out more, editor at killik.com. And for those people thinking, I'm not sure about currency pairs and bond markets, where do I go for that stuff? It's killik.com/learn. There are some tabs down here. One will give you bonds and another one will give you currencies.